All right, I think we can get started slowly. So welcome back everybody to another webinar. It's our second and last one for this season. Today we have another topic on agent security. So let me introduce to you our speaker today. Mateusz is an AI safety engineer at GraySwan, where he builds red teaming tools and safety benchmarks for frontier AI systems. He recently was the first author on a large-scale indirect prompt injection study with co-authors from Anthropic, OpenAI, Meta, UK AISI, and the US CAISI. Previously, he also co-authored a paper called AgentHarm, which got into ICLR last year and scored over 200 citations, as well as another AI agent security paper that was presented at NeurIPS in 2025. His work has been cited in the Grok-4 and the Grok-4.1 model cards, the GPT-5 system card, and multiple Claude system cards. And today, Mateusz is going to tell us about his most recent paper on indirect prompt injections. So without further ado, Mateusz, thanks very much for your presence today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Hope you hear me fine. So yeah, I work at Gray Swan. Like one of the big things which we do is these big, large-scale red teaming competitions, and this one was on indirect injections. So I'll just go over like the whole problem, then I'll go into how the arena actually works, what the users see that are competing in the arena, the results, and then some limitations and what we're planning for their next arenas. So hopefully it isn't a surprise to anyone here, but agents are like starting to take over everything. Most enterprises are using AI in some kind of way, and now we're moving to most enterprises using agents everywhere. And all of those, because the agents, they have access to external data via emails, documents, GitHub PRs, web pages, and so on. So that leaves a lot of different places where they can be attacked. So just to clarify what an indirect injection is, a direct prompt injection is when you're directly asking the agent, or like the model you're interacting with, to do something harmful. So you're like, oh, give me instructions how to make heroin at home. Whereas indirect injections, you're actually a benign user. You're just asking the model to do something benign. So just go look at my emails, tell me like what's happening. And then the agent will go look at your emails, and someone send you an email, which is actually an attack to try to get the agent to do something harmful on your device. So that's where the injection would be by a third party, left in some kind of data source that is returned via a tool output. So a lot of the prior indirect injection benchmarks, they have a few limitations. One is they're often only looking at whether the agent actually completes the harmful action, whereas one of the big things which we focus on is, yes, whether the agent does the harmful action, but also does the agent conceal it from the user. And like the mentality behind this is like, when you're kind of vibe coding, just interacting with the agent, you might not be fully paying attention, or you might not understand every single action it makes, especially like when it's making multiple actions and you're just kind of accepting things. But if the agent spots something and like it meant you in the response to you, where it's explaining what it's trying to do, it mentions, oh, I saw something suspicious, then you would interact, you like stop and like not accept whatever it's trying to do, and actually will read the tool call and maybe look at the two outputs themselves. So we're kind of trying to mimic that scenario, which is, I think, what like is happening a lot in the world. Yeah, so for example, the first part, which is the tool injection, that just the tool judge that just looks at whether the agent made a specific tool call. That is like kind of what we're trying to target with the specific arguments, so we can kind of check that programmatically. And then we have LLM judges, which where we have different objectives for each specific behavior. And those might be checking for things like, okay, does the agent provide a false justification for trying to do something harmful, trying to give like a benign reason for the harmful action to the user. And then generally we had 41 behaviors, where 32 had both judges, 7 had only 2 judges, and 2 had only prompt judges. And so these LLM judges, they would be given like a very specific rubric to kind of try to avoid noise when judging. And like I mentioned, there will be multiple criteria, so they'll kind of focus on things like concealment, false justification. Yeah, and that's kind of like the whole vibe. And like most will have 1, 2, 3 criteria depending on the specific behavior and what we thought that made most sense for the specific behavior. So the way the whole arena was set up, we have our users, then the agent, and that's within the external data, which is when the injection comes in, and that injection would usually be part of a tool output, which we already would have gotten or we created synthetically. For example, for coding scenarios, we would actually get transcripts from using CAISI or Claude Code, actual like coding tools, and then have like a little place where the user can inject the kind of harmful instructions. And we divided all of those behaviors into 3 different settings: a tool-use setting, a coding scenario, and a computer-use scenarios from models which have vision capabilities. And we try to kind of improve realism, like I mentioned, by using, for example, for coding, using tools which are actually like tools that people use, and trying to use scenarios where it's like not like a random small toy repository. We use real repositories, and that's where we would input the injections to kind of try to bring that up, because that is like an issue in a lot of our previous benchmarks, including some of our arenas. And just to clarify kind of what the threat model is, because that's also very important. And I'll show kind of more examples of like what the user actually sees. But to clarify, the attacker who is trying to get the agent to do the harmful action, they do have access to the whole conversation, including the prefill before creating the payload. So that is like slightly unrealistic, because in a lot of scenarios, in most scenarios that are realistic, the attacker wouldn't have access to this. They know the exact target action which they're trying to do, which is on the realistic side, because like when you're trying to get an agent to do something via an injection, you know what you're trying to get the agent to do. And like we allow the user to craft the injection and see the surrounding text, but they don't get to see they don't get to adjust all of the text from the tool output. So it will be just like a small part of a tool output. For example, for a tool-use scenario where an agent might be looking at some reviews, we don't let the attacker craft the whole tool output. It will just be like one review, and it'll be like the description field of that specific review. And we only do one turn, which can consist of like multiple actions. So it's not multi-turn back and forth. Once you do the injection, the model gets to respond, where it might make 2 calls, see 2 outputs from those 2 calls, and then it will finish its action with a response to the user. And then if you want to try again, the conversation doesn't continue. You have to create a new injection or write the same one, or adjust the injection you just made, and the model gets to go again from that same point. And the attacker also doesn't get to adjust any of the other previous prefill. They only adjust specifically that one part of the tool output that we specified. So there's a lot going here. So this is kind of like what the user does see, which, as I mentioned, they'll see the whole system prompt, the previous messages, and then they get to, I don't know if I can zoom in, like in the middle, I'm not sure if you can see my mouse, there's a fill tag, so it's curly brackets, fill, end of curly brackets, and that's specifically where the injection goes. Then below, you can see that the attacker has inserted the injection, so they get to see what the injection looks like. And then on the right, it's after sending that to the attacker, to the target model. You can see the two calls that the agent makes, and then the final 2 response, the final response from the model. And then after you get that. Not every submission, not every chat is judged. You decide based on like the output if you want to submit it to the judges, or if because there's no need to judge if the user already can see like, okay, the model clearly didn't do what I wanted it to do, so they can kind of iterate. But when they do submit that to the judges, they'll get to see the responses from the judges so that they know, okay, I maybe got like a high enough score on this specific criteria, and on another criteria they might have not, and they'll get feedback. So they get a lot of information to kind of help us get as many breaks possible, instead of keeping things very black box where there won't be any kind of feedback from the system on like what happened and why the model didn't comply. This is a similar but two-use example, which is basically the same, but it has, on the left has a bit more information of what the user will see, where we specify the specific objective that the attacker has, where we mention the specific tool that it is trying to achieve, and then a bit of a summary and description of the whole scenario. And as I mentioned, we also have computer use examples. So this is kind of like what the agent would see, where on the left, it kind of mimics Amazon looks like, and then you can see like in the yellow box, there's a your text which gets replaced by the user injection. There you can see an example on the top right. And then again, once that is injected, the agent gets to respond. It makes tool calls and then responds to the user, and then that gets submitted to the judges, where in this case only 2 of the judges pass and 1 doesn't, which means that this isn't a successful break because we require all of the criteria and all the judges to pass the threshold for it to actually count. I just built a comparison like to a lot of the other benchmarks. One big thing that previous benchmarks have really focused on is having very specific tool-use scenarios, and so like basically most of them have. There's only 2 other benchmarks at the time that we kind of mentioned. They were focused on computer use, but none were really focused on both tool use, coding agents, and computer use agents. None other have really focused on the kind of whole consumer part, which is one of the more unique parts of our benchmark. And then another fairly unique part is like we're doing quarterly updates. So this was originally run in Q4 of 2025, and now since then we've run a Q1 version in 26 and a Q2 version in 26, where we make for each one we make new behaviors, which then requires us to get new attacks from the competitors in the arena. So that kind of helps us both improve our behaviors, because like it is quite hard to straight away get everything correct, which we definitely didn't. And then you get a kind of update, and also helps us not saturate, as a lot of models might like fairly often, where benchmarks after 6 months, 3 months, sometimes 12 months, if it's a really difficult benchmark, they get saturated. So that will also help us do that. In general, for this specific quarter, we end up having over 200,000 chats, which is kind of like just the direct attempts, and then over 60,000 submissions, which is where a user actually asks to get their chat judged by the judges that we have. 8,000 successful breaks, and a bit over 400 unique participants. And a bit more info on the kind of whole structure of how things worked. We initially had a wave 0, which was just like 4 behaviors, just to kind of get things going, get people ready, also help us prepare. And all of the metrics don't include any of this, because it was like a very iterative phase, and we just kind of didn't want to include that. And then we had the waves 1 and wave 2, where the prizes were actually up for those, and that had 37 behaviors over 2 weeks. So the wave 1 started, a week lasted, and then the wave 2 started, and users could still submit breaks and like use both waves. But and like we collected it after the first week ended after the second wave. And then for all the metrics, we use deduplicate chats and submissions, where we look at model behavior pairs and basically look for any duplicates and remove them to avoid counting things twice. On the interface side, all the models were anonymized, so you don't know what kind of model you're attacking, whether it's a very robust model or a not robust one. The whole selection is randomized. You get real feedback after each chat, so kind of it's very quick to iterate. And the chats, again, are not judged. The submissions are what is judged. Onto the actual results. So on the main arena itself, here's like the main kind of ASR, where we divide the total breaks by the total chats we had. For example, on the top left, you see Gemini with 1.6K breaks, and it had 19,000 chats in total, giving it an ASR of 8.5, which is a big standout. And there's some reasons for it, which hopefully some of the next talks will kind of give a bit of an explanation, but not really. It's more information of like where it's like not robust. And then most of the models kind of slowly taper off, and like the big standouts, which might not be too surprising, you see the GPTs and the Claudes being by far the most robust. And I think maybe the most surprising might be that Grok-4 is quite robust in here, because at least in my view, like Grok-4 is like a bit like it's often wants to, like the way kind of they trained it because of Elon Musk. It's more willing to help you, but actually like on this specific kind of benchmark that we had, it kind of shows that like it might be more by design when it is like not harmful, but in the scenarios where it's like injections, it's actually quite robust because it's like it's still like a state-of-the-art model in terms of instruction following. So I think that's kind of one of the potential indicators of this, and explanations why Grok, which some people might not see as, might not come in with the predisposition of thinking it will be as low as GPT 5.1. Here's like another way to look at the ASR as well. Here's like per behavior. So we look at how many behaviors were actually broken. So for most models, they kind of land in the 70 to 100 range, with the open source ones and Gemini 2.5 Pro being like much closer to like 90 and 100%. And Opus, again, being the massive standout, where it only broke on 12 behaviors of the 37 that we counted for the wave 1 and wave 2. And above a caveat, some models might have less behaviors. For Kimi and for which one else? For Secaline, that's because they don't have vision. And then GPT 5.1 that joined in the second wave, which was the biggest wave. So it missed the whole wave 1, because that's around the time that was actually released, or we had access. I forgot which one it was first. Yeah, and a bit more on kind of how kind of the breaks developed over time. So so this kind of shows the cumulative breaks versus the actual attempts that we had against each model. And for most models, it's quite linear. So there isn't like a wave where people are like really struggling, and then like suddenly they'll get a lot of breaks because kind of they found them, or there's like a specific amount of attempts that it usually takes people to get a break. It tends to be fairly linear throughout the whole competition, and it could like for a bunch of reasons. The only kind of big standout I would say that we have here is Gemini 2.5 Pro, where around halfway it seems to shoot up, and which some of the next plots might show as well. I think that's mainly because in the wave 2, which is around the halfway point, we had more computer scenarios, and spoiler, that is like one of the main reasons why the Gemini 2.5 Pro is kind of so high in ASR throughout the whole competition. Yeah, so this is kind of what I was talking about. On the plot on the right, we show the ASR, the kind of modality. By modality, I mean tool use, coding, and computer use. Like the big thing that really stands out straight away is that Gemini 2.5 Pro on computer use is by far the most like unsafe thing, almost unsafe setting and model in the whole competition, being about 50%, and that's the only one. The only combination that is actually above 10% at all. Although if you look at the kind of combination of tool use and coding for Gemini and the other models, it would still be the most, would still have the highest ASR actually in combination, but it wouldn't be such a big difference kind of in the first way, like you really see it stand out. So that is the main kind of reason why it's so high up compared to the other ones in the previous plots. And I think like kind of another interesting thing is on the opposite side, you actually see the only other model which has computer use as its highest ASR setting, and that's Claude Opus 4.5, where it has no breaks on the coding behaviors. And computer use is where it was the most vulnerable, although it's still not very vulnerable against those compared to everything else. And then for all the other models, it's a clear trend. Tool use is where they're most vulnerable, and it kind of tends to be like coding and computer use are similar for most models. And yeah, kind of on the left, you can see the general ASR modality in Q4. But then since, as I mentioned, we already run Q1 and Q2, so I have some of the results to kind of show here. Here's everything together, where we go from Q4 25 to Q1 26 and Q2 26, and I don't think there is like a general trend. An issue for maybe coding is just the kind of scenario, or it's where most companies kind of focus on. Maybe they have the most data there, so that's why it was the most robust in Q4, but that completely flipped in Q1, so I was very much corrected straight away. Where coding dominated, and to make things, flip things in Q2, actually computer use, which was the most vulnerable setting. So I don't really have like a good explanation for this, but I think it's like an above an interesting insight without too much extra information. So here we show just the tool judge rate in the solid bars, and then in the dashed line is conditioned on the tool judge passing. What is the probability of the consumer, the prompt judge passing? And that is like quite high, which kind of indicates that like, okay, once you can get a model to do something harmful, it's not that much harder to actually get it to like do other harmful things, like concealing its intent. Yes, I think that's really interesting. And like I don't think there's really a major trend between like the models. It kind of follows a wave where it goes up, where it's up, and kind of slowly goes up, and then like drops down again with the Opus family, the Claude family. We also looked at capability versus ASR. And yeah, there doesn't seem to be a correlation on this. We did a similar paper a year before, and we saw the same thing. It does the ASR tends to be much more dominated by the model family. The only kind of counterpoint is within a model family, you will see trends of more capabilities means a more robust model. The best case for that is the Claude family, where you see Haiku, Sonnet, Opus kind of following that trend. And also for Nova, it is kind of like the same trend where Nova 1 Premier, which is, assuming it's a bigger model, but it was less capable compared to Nova 2 Lite, which has a lower ASR and is much more capable on the specific benchmark that we chose. but we did try other benchmarks or other kind of metrics like LM Arena, and we noticed the same thing. We just decided to go with GPQA Diamond as it wasn't fully saturated at the time, and LM Arena is reward hacked, so it's hard to use it as a capability measure. And to kind of try understand whether there's other factors affecting specific models having lower ASRs and higher ASRs. We also looked at how many unique users actually attempted every single model, and except the GPT 5.1, which I mentioned, only entered in wave 2, which is why it has less unique users. We don't really see a trend. Again, it looks very similar to the capability plots, where there really isn't any major trend. You do see Opus having slightly lower than the other Claude models, but then the other Claude models all have still the lowest ASRs compared to all the other model families, and they still had a fair amount of unique users compared to everything else. That is that. So I think that was one of the reasons why Claude performed. So then after so this was just all on the pure arena data, which is all kind of human driven. And then so what we did is we extracted a set of only successful breaks that worked on at least one model, and we tried to kind of extract it evenly with up to 9 samples per model behavior pair. Although for some models we didn't have 9 breaks per model, especially the Claude model, so not ideal. But this by kind of sampling this way, we went from 8.6K breaks to 2.6K, and we run each attack once on all of the models in the arena, plus 2 new models which are Gemini 3 Pro and Kimi K2 No Thinking. So these are kind of the results from that. And there's a few things that slightly change. On the left side of in general, I think the numbers are much higher. You're not seeing anything below 1%. Even Opus has 2.5% ASR, which is much higher, multiples higher than what it was in the pure arena. And then some models are really high, like the 30s, 40s, 50s. And you do see Quen actually taken over as the least robust model, and Gemini slightly moving down. Not too sure why, but that is just the case. So maybe kind of the first plot was a little bit unfair to Gemini, but it's still up there with the least robust models. And then everything else mainly stayed the same. The one big thing to kind of look at is Gemini did the Gemini 3 Pro model does much better, and kind of it's much closer to the kind of other frontier models. Although with the caveat that there was no adversary pressure on that model during the kind of arena itself. So you can assume if it was an arena, it would probably be a few percentages higher, but from our kind of previous experiments, we wouldn't expect it to be that much higher, so where it would be close to Gemini 2.5 Pro. And for the most part, everything else stayed the same. We do have the Kimi K2 thinking model, which was, I forget which one was it in the arena. Yeah, Kimi K2 thinking was in the arena, so it had the adversary pressure. But when we tried Kimi K2 with no thinking, it actually performs worse. So it has a higher ASR, which maybe is kind of expected. The thinking model would perform better. We don't have many more experiments to actually go too much and make any crazy claims of thinking versus no thinking on ASR. Yeah, this wasn't in the paper, but this is from the transfer experiments from Q1, where one of the kind of issues with this first plot is we only did one inference of every single attack, and that is still a bit noisy. So we run each attack 4 times, and then we do sampling to kind of get metrics of how many kind of the ASR behavior when you sample K attacks. So for example, at K, so like also a big caveat on this, this is like per attempt ASR, whereas this is per behavior. So that is like slightly different as well, hence like the numbers are just going to be in general. But this also just kind of gives you a bit more information of where things stood, kind of in the February, March area, where we still see Claude family by far the safest, and then GPT being closer, Gemini 3.1 Pro, which actually this time did have the adversarial pressure from the arena, as all of these models were in the arena itself. But I think GPT 5.4. But yeah, now these kind of more, some of them more newer results, and the actually kind of big surprise is you actually do see in this arena for some reason Grok or much worse, potentially because all the other models were basically upgraded. I think basically every single other every model except Nova 2 Lite was upgraded, and maybe Haiku 4.5. Very cool. Yeah, I think that's like the only ones. So there is a bit unfair to Grok. Grok 4.1 fast does a little bit better, and the fast name, I think it is a smaller model, so it still does okay, similar to Gemini 3 Flash. But yeah, I won't spend too much time on this. And yeah, this is back to kind of the transfer experiments from the Q4. This is kind of like a heat matrix of how different attacks transfer to different models, where on the left we have the name of the model which the attack came from. So as I mentioned, we sampled for the transfer experiments, we only sampled at injections which worked on some model. So this is what model actually worked on. And then in the columns, we have what is the target model. So what model we tried this injection on. And there's a few standout things. The one big standout is that actually worked on Opus, transfer like insanely well to every single model. And that tends to be a trend in general, where attacks from models which have in the arena itself lower ASRs, the attacks transfer really, really well to models which had higher ASRs in the arena, and hence you can see the big quadrants. Like the top right, you see like a very bright red, orange quadrant, and on the left you see the opposite. It's like very green. That's because on the bottom left, it's attacks that worked on a less robust model, transferring them to robust models based on the arena results. Yes, I think in general that's like a bit of a kind of worrying thing, because it kind of gives you a bit of an insight that, like, okay, if you can get a break on one model, which might take a amount of resources to break Opus, you can actually just like use it across the board with high success. And I think basically like nearly higher success rate on most models than on the Opus itself, which is a little bit funny. Yeah. Yeah, we also did some analysis on like the strategies that people used, trying to see if there's the specific strategies that work better on models, or like are there any like specific gaping holes that would explain kind of the results from the transfer analysis, where we see, okay, some kind of attacks just work really well on everything, not just the original model itself. So one of the big findings is we, after doing kind of this analysis, which you can get a bit more info on this in the paper itself, I won't go into too much detail. But yeah, we found some actually kind of clusters of injections which work quite well across the board. So out of the 41 behaviors, we found one strategy which worked on 21 scenarios across 9 models, and that consisted of 63 different attack strings, which is a bit worrying. And like on the cosine similarity, those attack strings are quite similar. So they had a score of 0.92, which is fairly similar. So it's a bit of an indication that there may be specific kind of templates, specific kind of strategies which do actually work kind of across the board on different types of scenarios, different types of settings, different types of models. Although we didn't find too many of those, like that kind of drastic number of 21 and 9 and 63 isn't really repeated by other strategies. We have some smaller ones which work across 8 scenarios of 7 and 5, 6 models, which isn't, you can't really make too much of a claim on like universality on those. We also looked at strategies for the different settings. So one interesting thing is on the tool use encoding settings, we did find that the highest ASR strategy was actually the same one, which we ended up calling chainful harmful shell with benign, which is definitely interesting that there is like this kind of one specific strategy appears in both kind of settings where the behaviors were quite different, and the whole kind of setup for those behaviors were very different. Although for computer use, this wasn't the case. But we did actually find the most successful strategy was in the computer use setting, which had the top ASR of 6.2% of the strategies. And that was called excessive repetition, which that one is hopefully a bit more explanatory because I forgot what in harmful shell benign actually does. And there's like no other top strategies landing that are worthy of notice. This one, there's like a bit, we have like much more information on like the whole strategy analysis, and like very specific examples of like what actually each strategy consisted of. I think it's a good use of the time. Another thing which isn't in the paper, but hopefully we'll add it soon to one of the versions, where we actually, because we do, like one thing we notice is a lot of companies now are using guardrails for things like bio, for cyber, and for injections. So we wanted to see a new model, Gemini 3.5 Flash. Yeah, it's a very new model, but it's still lightweight, although probably more expensive than anything any provider would actually use as a lightweight classifier. But yeah, we ran those with like a very basic prompt to tell us whether if it thinks that there's an injection in the tool output, and we copied the tool output and the tool call to the prompt of the model. And then for the benign case, we use our prefills and examples of the tool outputs which had injections, but with removed injections. And so for the scenario, we did find Gemini was able to get 90% correct on the injections and 87 on the benign, which might seem high, but like in reality, that's like unusable basically, just because like a 10% or 30% false positive rate is something I don't think any provider would actually be willing to use. So it isn't as straightforward as just, okay, you just slap on the latest small model on your tool outputs and use that as your injection. So yeah, I don't think classifying injections and detecting them is necessarily like a solved problem. And then, so what's next? Some of them have actually been done already in some of the arenas that we've done. So one thing which we wanted to kind of take a look at, which we did actually in Q1, is the dual objective. It was relatively tangled in our scenarios because like most behaviors had both. We wanted to kind of understand kind of how things differ, how much easier it is to make different when you just have the tool use, when you just have and then when you have tool use with response monitoring, and also when you have tool use and COT monitoring, because that's also like another big thing where some models might not actually mention their like kind of injection stuff in the response, and they'll follow the instructions from the injections, but they actually might mention it in their COT. So we kind of have three variants of each one in for each behavior in quarter one. Another thing which I think we did in the latest version is we did have pre-fills, so which isn't ideal. It kind of has some kind of issues with like eval awareness. There seem to be there's like some research that shows models are aware when they're kind of given text which wasn't produced by them. So now we're actually using pre-fills made by that specific model itself for the pre-fill, so it's kind of unique per model. As I mentioned, also one-shot transfer, it was noisy, so we did do the kind of case sampling, and that's what we carry on using after for all of our transfer experiments. And yeah, hopefully we'll add those to the papers as well for quarter one and quarter two. There always kind of will be for like a good while until someone hopefully solves it. There definitely is like a realism gap on everything. So it is something that we're trying to work on using the sandboxes, which is something we moved on to in quarter two, where we're using like a specific provider to actually run sandboxes for the computer use for their coding. So we'll give the agents a bit more freedom to kind of interact, and that kind of unlocks a few extra things, including the kind of the whole singleton limitation. That is also something we're trying to move away from, although it has kind of some benefits. Kind of moving to multi-turn makes some judging easier and some harder. So yeah, that is like one difficulty. Yeah, and I think this is just information on the different points I just said. So yeah, I think like the big five takeaways is that concealment definitely was a missing dimension, and I think we should carry on actually trying to mimic how people are actually using agents and having our benchmarks measure things which which kind of simulate more how people use agents. So yeah, I hope like more benchmarks will actually focus on concealment as well, or have it as one part, maybe like not too much, because at the end of the day, what does like matter in the end, it is like whether the model makes a harmful tool, but yeah, there's other things to be involved. Every model is still vulnerable, although you'll see Opus which had 0.5% ASR, that still is pretty bad. Where at least in my opinion, where like at the scale that these models are being used, it's like millions, tens of millions probably requests a day. So 0.5% of those is still a quite large amount. So hopefully we can get those numbers. The one, I think in general, that is where the field is moving to. Kind of, I think most models are getting more robust, but hopefully we can kind of speed that up. There doesn't seem to be a correlation between capability and robustness in general, but then when you start extracting other things, there likely will be. But like I think it's mainly still explained by kind of the whole training procedure that is much more telling of like what the robustness will be. Again, the hardest attacks transfer really well. I think that's also kind of like an important takeaway. Because like Opus attacks succeed 44 to 81% on every other model, which is much higher than their 0.5%. So that is like worrying, because like when you do find that 0.5% attack that succeeds in Opus, that gives you you have an attack string which works 50 or over 50% of the times in every other single model, which is much worse. And the benchmarks do wrap fast, so we are trying to we are like committing to kind of do this, and like we've already done quarter one, quarter two. There's some plans for quarter 2.5, maybe quarter three. Things are moving fast, so hopefully we'll kind of be able to keep up with that and avoid our benchmark being saturated as we kind of supply it for the lab. So it's relatively important. And yeah, I think that's it for me. Here's just like a bit more info. Oh, I forgot to add my personal email as well. But here's my GraySwan email, and then personal email. Feel free to reach out to me. And we did open source the Grok-4 version. So we have that on GitHub where you can actually use the whole setup, including the computer use stuff. And we open sourced a subset of the attacks that worked on Quen because we didn't want to, release the attacks that worked on Opus that would give you 50% ASR on other models because I think that would be relatively unresponsible. And if you're ever bored and you want to do some red teaming, feel free to join our arena. Most of the time we have something running and it wasn't clear, it's like open to everyone. Anyone can just go to the arena and just like participate and try your luck. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Thanks very much, Mateusz, for this super comprehensive overview of your paper. Please join me, everybody, in clapping virtually for Mateusz with emojis. There we go. And yeah, we're gonna open the floor to questions from the audience. Either raise your hand or just unmute yourself. Okay, I can get us started. So I think I'm confusing myself about something regarding the visual use in your computer task, like computer use, right? The way that the agent interacts or understands the world is it processes screenshots of the website, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Because like one question I wanted to ask you is, forget about prompt injections. It's very hard to jailbreak like Opus 4.8 these days through text only. Like they've gotten really good at preventing jailbreaks, right? But like basically every other modality is still crap. So text to image, text to sound, or the other way around. Yeah, they're all still pretty crap, right? So I was wondering if prompt injections are better basically are much easier to perform in one modality versus another. So like I guess what I would be interested in is having a clean comparison between text-based and image-based prompt injections. But the thing is, your experiment also conflates it with a different task nature, so to speak, because you're having two effects at the same time. You're doing computer use and image recognition at the same time, right? Okay. Anyway, my question is, in your experience, is prompt injection is injecting prompts much easier to the visual modality as opposed to the text modality?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I think for Opus specifically, on like the latest stuff that I saw, I think it's like for coding specifically, it's like insanely hard. I definitely think it is much more vulnerable in other modalities, but I'm not sure. But I think it will actually be more vulnerable in like tool use than just like coding it itself. And that's what I've noticed for like the last few months. I think just like for coding it is like just really secure. I imagine Anthropic might be doing some very focused stuff on that, given like the whole cybersecurity kind of debacle that they had with Mythos. They probably started this earlier. So I think that's like my general take. Is just like coding. They probably are doing more training, and that's like where it's specifically really robust.
Mm-hmm. Could you not do an experiment where it's not coding, so the agent does not take screenshots of a website, but like it retrieves text, and then within this text you have an image embedded. So it's kind of like you're separating the effect of coding from the image recognition. Have you ever run something like that?
No, we haven't.
Okay. Do you think it would be interesting, or am I just like completely off the mark here?
No, I think like it's good to kind of extract things because like there's like so many conflating things. Because like it like I think like in the end it will just end up being like, okay, they're probably going to be just like more robust on the things they train at. So they might even, so like Opus might be even like more vulnerable in the Codex or CASA scaffold versus Claude Code, because that is just like what they train on. So I think just trying to like separate it into like sub parts will probably lead, in my opinion, like to higher AISR.
Mm-hmm. And do you know how usually people train against this behavior? Like, is it adversarial training on adversarial examples essentially, or what?
I'm not too sure. From I think from what I've seen, they probably do some kind of classifiers for most of the time. So like even when you use Claude Code and like you intercept the tool use, or you look at like what happens, it actually doesn't get tool use directly back. It tells another model another model what to do, and that gets, so like I think they basically have like classifiers everywhere, and I think they might have some on computers, and that's what I've seen work the best for them. Because like I've also been doing like some other like sensitive topic work, and like I've seen Opus help me with things which you might think it wouldn't want to help you, and the only times I've really had it like stop, it's not because it wants to stop, it's because the like classifier on Claude Code it gets hit, and like I can't get past it, but Claude is like very clearly happy to be like helping me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember seeing in Opus 4.8 system card they have linear probes for prompt injections. That was pretty interesting. Right. Anyway, any other questions from the audience? No? Why are people so quiet today? Okay, I was wondering if there is literature on prompt injecting the judges, the LLM judges.
I don't know if it has if this is like new stuff. It is something I wanted to do a while ago with Simon. It will be on his less wrong or alignment. I know he did like the latest. See if I can quickly find it. No, he basically did something like that where he was trying to do that. Yeah, something was this.
Robustness of model evaluations.
I'm not sure if it was this, but he did something along the lines of this. But I don't recall. Yeah, I haven't seen like any new work basically on this. Like I find that very interesting. Yeah, like I'm not sure if people actually like find this in the wild.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is like pretty difficult to do, right? Because it's sort of a two-stage prompt injection. You first have to prompt inject the agent itself, and then the judge is going to be scoring this.
Yeah.
How come the judge doesn't get tricked by the same prompt injection? Like it reads the transcript, so at some point it sees the same tokens, right?
Yeah, I guess it's like it's given the context that like it should be expecting the injection, so it probably kind of treats it as that.
All right. Okay.
Although I also like from my analysis, a lot of the like on the strategy side, I did notice a lot of the strategies being things like fake chain of thought, so just like tricking the model into thinking, oh, it was actually doing something, so it kind of just continues, or like framing it in like a benign way. Yeah, I think that's like very, especially like with injections, you can often like frame things to be like somewhat benign, or just confuse the model by just like making it think that's actually what it was already doing. So it's like, oh yeah, let me continue doing what I was just doing.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right. Well, I mean, I can keep asking questions. I have plenty of questions. Yeah, raise your hand if you want to stop me. Regarding the online arena thing, right? That you have.
Yeah.
How is that one different from the Lakera arena? That was
No
called
idea.
Gandalf, I think. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't really pay attention to that.
Fair enough.
Yeah, yeah, I can quickly show our arena. We do like a bunch of. Let me not with my GraySwan account because I'm about to leak things. Sorry, let me open. Let me open a safe browser. Private window.
Well, if you have access to Mythos or something, you can just show me the API key on the screen. I'm not going to complain.
No worries, no worries. I'm definitely not logged in here. Let me show this. Screen. Oh. Yeah, we do like a bunch of different ones. So like, I think we're doing like a cyber one. We do the quarterly indirect injections. Oh my god. View. Yeah, injections. There's like a human one as well, human study, where we're testing if humans are when they fall for injections, and they do. We did like a safeguards one as well, where we had people first do red teaming, then they submitted the classifiers for blue team, and then the red team is trying to do it again. So we try to do like a bunch of different stuff. A lot of just agents though, and coding cyber. Yeah, the things that you can expect labs to care about because they are the sponsors of every single arena.
Oh, right.
I guess that's the difference. The labs sponsor them, so it's exactly what the labs want.
Nice. On a much more practical side, do you do any coding still yourself, or is it shouting at codecs?
I'm actually banned from GPT. I have banned. Please unban me, OpenAI.
Because of all your cyber questions?
I think it was like weapons of mass destruction or something like a year ago.
Yeah. We get rate limits. It's so hard. It's crazy. And Opus has such sensitive triggers. It's ridiculous. You ask it for some completely unrelated question, and then it pulls up some memory from 2 months ago where you talked to it about biology. It's completely useless in some cases.
I do use Claude code, and then yes, I don't do any coding. I haven't done coding for a good while. I've been like a vibe coder from the early days, one of the original ones.
Nice. So you basically embraced the replacement of software engineers. It's maybe the only right way to go forwards. All right, last chance to ask questions because we're at the hour. Okay, if there are no questions, let's thank Mateusz once again. Yeah, thanks. It was a really comprehensive presentation, an onslaught of information from your paper. Thanks again.